And I basically couldn't leave the house without being connected to a hose for oxygen. If I get into a occupied room with a lot of people, I can't compete for the oxygen. I have to leave unless I have portable oxygen with me.
Randy Smith is suffering from chronic silicosis. What's happened in his lungs is the body's reaction to the inhaling of dust containing crystalline silica. Larger particles are caught in the mucus of the nose and throat and coughed up or swallowed. But micron-sized broken crystals, so much smaller than a human hair they're invisible, are breathed into the lungs. These are not the harmless grains of beach sand, but minute fractured crystals with jagged edges that attach to the air sacs in the lungs. The body's natural reaction to the foreign particles forms nodules of fibrous material around them. As the nodules grow, the lungs are no longer able to effectively take oxygen from the air. Shortness of breath, inability to perform the simplest tasks, and even death can follow. The danger of silicosis became nationally known in 1931 with the notorious Hawks Nest Dam project. 4,887 men tunneled through the sandstone of West Virginia to build a dam and hydroelectric power station. The rock was almost pure silica. Nearly 800 of the workers died of acute silicosis, a disease they developed in a matter of months because of repeated exposure to dust containing high levels of silica. Construction sites today are safer than Hawks Nest, but the potential remains for permanent lung damage due to the silica dust they can generate.
No one knows the effect that silicosis has. It's a deadly disease, very deadly. My husband died at a young age, and he was robbed, and we were all robbed.
The widow of a construction worker killed by breathable silica and their children face the future without him. Silicosis makes victims more susceptible to bronchitis, infectious diseases of the lungs such as tuberculosis. For workers whose lungs are scarred by silicosis, life is depressing and frustrating.
I feel down, I feel out. I can't do nothing. I can't even wash my car. I can't even set out garbage. I can't do anything, things I used to do. I can't jog, I can't lift weights. I used to do a little boxing. I can't do that no more. So I see other people doing that. That make me feel bad, a little jealous because I can't do it no more.
And silica is classified as a Group 1 carcinogenic substance, which can lead to cancer. Most painful for the survivors of silicosis victims is the fact that the disease is preventable. This program is designed to show you how to keep silicosis from hurting you and your family, to literally save your breath.
Right on.
Suppressing the dust at the source is the best possible engineering control. Using wet spray can keep particles of crystalline silica down. If the dust is not airborne, it cannot get into your lungs. Tools and equipment with water suppression systems, such as wet saws that direct water to the blade, are recommended. Simply using a hose to wet down the work area as the job progresses can help. Wet sweeping instead of dry sweeping will reduce dust. When doing abrasive blasting jobs, substituting other substances for silica sand reduces danger. Materials like steel shot or glass beads are less hazardous. Isolating the work area reduces exposure. It makes sense to keep employees who are not involved with the operation producing dust out of the area. Whenever possible, keep involved workers upwind from the silica generating activity. Enclosing the work area with sheeting to contain the dust can help keep silica out of workers' lungs. Exhaust ventilation of the dust before it escapes into the work site is beneficial to all employees there. A local exhaust system typically includes hoods, ducts, an air cleaner, and a fan. The idea is to remove the dust, not simply dilute it. Clean up using a vacuum with a high-efficiency particulate air filter. Merely blowing it away with compressed air can broadcast silica dust over other employees on the work site. The HEPA filter can keep most of it from becoming airborne. Dust collecting equipment is available when using grinders, floor scabblers, and tuck-pointing masonry. Work practice controls are needed on sites where engineering cannot keep the dust down to safe levels. Warning signs about the activity and the danger of silica exposure are necessary. They must be clear to all workers. Another way to limit workers' exposure is by having them work shorter shifts in the area where silica exposure exists. This technique for lowering exposure is allowable, but not recommended. Any period of time working in an area where silica exposure exists can pose some increased risk. When employees eat lunch or take a break, avoid dusty areas. The goal is to minimize contact with silica dust. Washing facilities should be readily located. Wash hands and face before eating, drinking, or smoking. And at the end of the day, change clothes at the job site and leave the work clothes there. A heartbreaking story from Connecticut illustrates how the silica dust clings to them. A cement mason's wife died of a rare form of cancer, her lungs clogged by silicosis after years of washing his work clothes.
Exposure limits. Who knows anything about exposure limits?
Training about hazards in the workplace is now required by state and federal right-to-know laws. Safety training should happen at the time of employment, before the work actually starts. Before construction workers ply their trades on his job site, the employer should see that they've had thoughtful instruction about engineering controls, work practices, and personal hygiene to reduce crystalline silica exposure. The Occupational Safety and Health Administration sets the permissible exposure limit, the maximum amount of airborne crystalline silica that an employee may be exposed to during a work shift. OSHA has set the PEL at 10 milligrams per cubic meter of air divided by the percentage of free silica plus 2. That's approximately 100 parts per million. Measuring the amount of free silica in your workplace is critical. The results of air monitoring can determine whether the contractor is complying with the OSHA laws.
So this is the personal pump, little BDX. It draws enough volume to simulate a normal respiration. This is a cyclone, and what it does is it takes the air and it spins it around on the inside and allows the heavy particulates to fall down into this little piece right here.
The air monitor also makes sure the correct level of respiratory protection is used. The heavier particles would not travel past the employee's mouth, nose, and throat. But the respirable particles, the ones small enough to reach your lungs, are collected onto the two-piece filter attached to the cyclone assembly. When engineering controls and work practices are not enough to reduce silica dust to safe levels, personal protective equipment, PPE, is necessary. This woman is wearing a respirator designed to protect her from breathable silica generated by her abrasive blasting work. But putting on a respirator is not a simple solution to the problem of silica dust. Before you can wear a respirator, the contractor must have a written respiratory protection plan in place. Before an employee is assigned to a task requiring a respirator, it must be determined that the person is physically able to perform the work and use the equipment.
So whenever you're ready, take a deep breath and as hard as you can.
Medical evaluations should be given to all workers who will be exposed to crystalline silica. The evaluation should take place before entering a trade and being placed on a job.
Keep going, keep going, keep going. Stop.
Pulmonary, that is, lung functioning tests, form part of the baseline information to determine if you are capable of performing the job.
And just relax your arm for me.
The doctor will look for symptoms of respiratory disease and gauge your overall health.
Again?
Compiling a medical and occupational history will enable medical staff to approve your readiness for the job and monitor your health as you progress in the trade.
And what we'll do is I'll go ahead and put together a report for your employer. We will give you a copy of that before you leave today.
The medical staff will do all they can to promote your good health, but in the case of silicosis, it's all about what you allow yourself to take into your lungs.
Certainly, compounding factors such as smoking should be addressed.
Every year in this country, 250 to 300 people die of silicosis, and complications brought on by the scarring of lung tissue.
Workers with chronic silicosis are prone to lung infections, including bronchitis and tuberculosis. While treatment can be directed toward complicating infections, there is no good treatment for silicosis itself. Efforts need to be focused on prevention. Reduction in silica exposure can and should occur through evaluation of the work process, proper ventilation, and the use of personal protective equipment such as respirators.
All employees must be trained to be sure the respirator fits properly. Along with the fit test, the respirator should be routinely inspected and cleaned and parts replaced as needed. Construction jobs at risk include sawing, hammering, drilling, grinding, and chipping of concrete, masonry, or rock, demolition of concrete or masonry structures, dry sweeping or using an air wand with concrete, rock, or sand dust, abrasive blasting with silica sand, abrasive blasting of concrete, crushing, loading, hauling, and dumping of rock. Demolition of concrete or masonry structures also exposes workers to free silica. Over time, working in silica dust can destroy your lungs' capacity to take in oxygen and destroy your life prematurely, like a building that no longer serves a useful purpose.
I grew up in the trade.
Randy Smith spent years working at construction sites. Eventually, he could no longer perform the simplest tasks.
And I couldn't figure out why I was so tired.
Life is not only very difficult for him, but also for his family.
I can go anytime. And that's a frightening place to be.
Randy Smith's message for workers in the construction trades is clear.
If I can save one person's life from this film, I'll be happy.
Be aware of the hazards of silica dust at your workplace and save your breath.
The sudden pull as you jump and fall away from the plane. The safe feeling of the parachute opening. And the majestic, slow ride downward. You feel protected. Now, most of you don't risk your life by jumping out of an airplane for fun. You do it here, at work, at a considerable height. Your life-saving devices may be a harness and a lanyard. Failure to hook up could mean the difference between life and death. After all, this person took the proper precautions because he knew he would fall. How do you know you won't? In recent years, falls have killed over 300 workers and injured thousands more. In fact, 1 in 5 fall victims die. Unfortunately, when this scaffold broke, the unprotected worker fell to his death. But this worker was eventually rescued because he hooked up. In fact, his fall was only 5 feet because he wore a shock-absorbing lanyard attached to a full body harness. Hooking up to fall protection saves lives. This program covers the Occupational Safety and Health Administration's fall protection regulations, including the types of personal fall protection systems, which systems you should use, equipment anchorage, tie-off, and use, rescue of fallen workers, and equipment care and inspection. There are 3 kinds of fall protection systems: personal fall arrest systems, positioning device systems, and personal fall protection systems for climbing activities. Personal fall arrest systems stop employees after they have fallen. This equipment consists of a body belt or harness, lanyards, lifelines, anchorage connectors, and descent control devices. Positioning device systems prevent falls by supporting the employee in a working position. Examples of positioning devices include this window cleaner's belt and window anchors, and this linesman's belt and pole strap. Personal fall protection systems for climbing activities protect the worker while he is climbing. An example is this ladder safety device with carrier, moving safety sleeve, and body belt. To better understand how fall protection equipment works, let's look at what happens in a fall. First, the person is in free fall. After a certain free fall distance, the system activates. It then takes additional distance called the deceleration distance to bring the person to a full stop. Look at it again. Keep in mind that force is needed to stop a fall. This fall arrest force hits the body through the straps of the belt or harness. To prevent injuries, fall arrest equipment often has a braking system to absorb some or most of your force. Fall protection equipment must be strong enough to absorb shock and designed to stop falls quickly without too much force on your body. The equipment your employer supplies should meet these standards. Unauthorized substitutions might not. So the first rule is use the equipment your company provides. Second, use equipment only for its designed purpose. OSHA recommends that training should cover the manufacturer's instructions on each item's intended use. The instructions will tell you whether certain items can be used for fall arrest or only for positioning, and when shock-absorbing lanyards must be used with belts or harnesses, as well as what kinds of lifelines to use with the system. Do not use any equipment for the wrong purpose. For example, do not use linesman's pole straps as lanyards unless they've been designed for fall arrest. Do not use chest harnesses if there is any possibility of free fall. Window anchors are to be used only for window cleaners' belts. And make sure snap hooks are the locking type and are designed to be used with the hardware you attach them to. Anchorages must meet certain strength requirements. Choose an anchor that will let you move enough to do your job. Also be sure that any anchor point you use has been approved by your employer, and check it for damage before trusting your life to it. When rigging your system, consider the free fall distance, the deceleration allowed by your equipment, and the stretch of the lifeline. The deceleration distance, or the distance needed to bring you to a full stop, may be provided by the manufacturer. If you use a shock-absorbing lanyard, an additional 3.5 feet, the most permitted, should be figured into the total deceleration distance. And remember, the farther your attachment to the lifeline is from the line's anchor, the more the line can stretch. Anchor points are important too. For example, this anchor point is low, and the lanyard too long. So if you fall directly under your anchor point, you will probably swing fall. Swing falls can be minimized by using a higher anchorage point or a shorter lanyard. An obvious fact: the farther something falls, the faster it goes, and the more force there is when it's stopped. So it's important to limit free fall distance in order to reduce the chance of being injured by the fall arrest force and falling into obstacles. For these reasons, the shorter your possible free fall, the better. So never rig a system that would allow you to free fall more than 6 feet. One way of limiting a free fall is to use a shorter lanyard. A second method is to raise your tie-off point to the lifeline or anchor. This reduces the amount of slack in your lanyard, and this lessens the distance you can fall. Your tie-off to the anchor must always be level with or higher than the connection to your belt or harness. Lifelines can be horizontal or vertical. Horizontal lifelines must be designed, installed, and used under the supervision of a qualified person. The more workers tied off to a single line, the stronger the line and its anchors must be. Vertical lifelines should never have more than 1 person per line. Make sure your line reaches to the ground or the next working level below, or terminate it in a way that will keep you from moving past its end. Tying off means connecting your belt or harness directly or indirectly to a secure anchor point. OSHA recommends that you be given manufacturer's instructions on the best tie-off methods. Tie off before you get into a position you could fall from. Certain ways of tying off weaken lines and can make it necessary to strengthen your system. For example, a tie-off that uses a knot will be weaker than a non-tie